Welcome to the A.T.TIPSCAST, exploring and investigating different implementation of assistive technology in public schools. I'm your host, Chris Bouguet. This is episode number 27, recorded on January 11th, 2009. 4 more days until my birthday on January 15th. I love presents if you want to send me one. This episode features the second of 2 parts of an interview with Tim Calabrese, who is the current manager of Operation Analysis for the Office of Pupil Transportation for the New York City Department of Education. I'm not going to keep you waiting any longer, other than to say that this second part of the interview is more of a brainstorming session about implementing technology during transportation to and from school to make that daily journey an educational experience. Without further ado, here is the rest of A.T.TIP number 38, Technology for Transport. I've pondered this for a while. In the county that I work for, you have some students on the bus for, any range of amount of time. But let's just say, even if the average was as low as a half hour one way and a half hour back, that's an hour a day that the student is on a bus, and that the school is responsible for that student while they're on that bus. Yet, I don't think there's much learning or education that goes on that bus during the time. Would you agree with that? Is that happening in New York City too, that you have students are on the bus, yet there's no education going on the
Absolutely. Bus? Absolutely. I completely agree. There's kind of like a negative space that gets filled in with this transportation. So the transporting is occurring, but the student isn't really being served other than the transport needs, right? They're not being engaged in any way. Whatever they do on that bus, as long as they behave, is their own business, and it does kind of seem like we're missing an opportunity to engage students in learning.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Is that there's a certain equity issue, I think, there if you try to do some instruction on the bus, in that some students who have longer bus rides would have more opportunity to be, have more instruction than other students that had shorter bus rides or that walk or don't take the bus at all, But it does seem like there's an opportunity there that, for some students at least, to provide some sort of, enhancement or enrichment program,
Absolutely. And I don't think that, I think certainly an engagement, an intellectual engagement could be done in such a way that it wouldn't necessarily be putting other students at a disadvantage. There could certainly be activities on those buses that would not, necessarily equate to a student on a bus gets better grades than a student who doesn't take the bus. I mean, that's not, that's
right. That's not what we're shooting for with the thought.
Right. We have noticed that students who have access to music or video on the bus tend to be better behaved, tend to enjoy their trips a little bit more. They tend to cause fewer problems to other students, and it can actually be very beneficial for transporting them.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. If you're engaged in something, you have less opportunity to have some sort of negative behavior, right?
I think so. I
find that with my own 2-year-old or 3-year-old.
I think the only caveat to that is the worry that if you have a student on a bus that has access to some kind of technology to do this, and you have another student on the bus that doesn't have the same access, how do we make sure that student who doesn't have it doesn't take it from the one student who does? That's
Sure. But if you're providing it to all students on the bus, then, so let's just throwing out an example. What if there was videos on the bus? Like monitors. If I've taken a Greyhound, they have little TV screens on the bus that I could watch, whatever the movie is that's being played. Well, instead of it being whatever the movie is that Greyhound has put in there, it's some sort of educational video that is universal enough that it could, hit a multitude of ages. Then maybe something like that would work.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it'd be provided some access to everybody.
Absolutely. I think there are, some concerns about how it would be administered. And certainly the physical bus the actual installation of monitors and so on and so forth, would have to be considered.
So if we weren't talking about videos mounted onto a bus, because obviously that's going to have some kind of cost. I mean, any sort of technology is going to have cost embedded in it, but installation and making sure that it's safe or whatever is going to be even an additional cost. MP3 players, or I guess video players, I mean, that would be another technology that can be used, but then you have, I guess, the management issue of it, right? Who manages those? How do you make sure they're not stolen? Is the bus driver going to manage those? Is it going to be an escort? Is it just special ed students, or do general ed students get them as well? There's a bunch of questions there.
Right. I think it could be incredibly powerful. It could be great. Students in varieties of different ways could actually take home, using the existing technology that they're already carrying or they're already using, would be able to make it transportable and make it mobile, and take it with them on the bus.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you're getting at there is you have all these different types of students with all sorts of different types of disabilities, and they all learn in different ways. So for one student might need the audio, where another student might need to read it, or another student might need to read it while listening to the audio, and others would need a video of it, and you need a device that encapsulates all of that so it meets the needs of as many different learners as possible, and that they can then take with them. So it would be an interesting study, I think.
I think it would be fascinating. I think what also could be added to it, and from the in New York City, most of our buses have matrons, which are people other than the driver that are responsible for monitoring students and making sure that they behave and so on and so forth. They get off at the right stops and so on and so forth. Now, in New York City's case, the matron is also an employee of the bus company, not part of the school system. However, I would imagine that in many school systems, they have matrons that are part of the school system. If the matron could assist on the bus with the education of students. Now, I know that there's all kinds of union rules as far as teachers go and stuff, but certainly it wouldn't replace classroom instruction, but it could be somebody who could help administer those needs on the bus when needed.
Sure. At bare minimum, managing those devices. Every device has a code. Johnny gets this coded device, and it goes out that way. So let's say an iPod, for instance, a video iPod. A video iPod number 12 goes with Johnny because it's loaded with the book that he's going to listen to on the ride home, and that's the person that's making sure they're being collected, or that they come back the next morning, or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So the management is not just management of students, but management of the devices as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to take the opportunity now to say, if anyone's listening to this podcast and they're actually doing this, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email at A.T.TIPSCAST@gmail.com, and I will pass it on to Tim to continue on with this discussion. I'd love to hear if someone's doing this, or if there's some graduate or doctorate student that is interested or is doing some sort of research like this, where they've taken a set number of devices and provided them to students with special needs that are on the bus, just to see if taking advantage of that time has some sort of impact on that student, then I'd love to hear from you too. So again, it's A.T.TIPSCAST@gmail.com. Tim, any final thoughts before we wrap up the interview?
Chris, I just want to say that I'm a big fan of A.T.TIPSCAST, and I think what you're doing is good work. I love the idea of collaborating and trading ideas. We work in different fields, but we're related, and I just think you're doing a great job.
Well, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on to the A.T.TIPSCAST and doing this interview with us. I think transportation is fascinating. I think there's lots of things that we can do, and you're doing it. I mean, the whole thing in trying to manage such a big task is fantastic. So, congratulations.
Thanks.
I'd like to thank Tim Calabrese for taking the time to talk a bit about transportation, special education, and brainstorming technology that could be used for instructional purposes.
I really think that we tapped into something interesting there during our discussion about using the time during transport for educational purposes. If you work for a school system that is already doing this, I'd love to hear from you. Or, if you have your own ideas about how to implement technology during transportation, I'd love to hear from you too. Please leave a comment over at attipscast.wordpress.com or send me an email at attipscast@gmail.com. Until next time, may all your interventions be inclusive and may all your strategies be supportive. Oh, and drive safely.